Oh, that was my recording. I just hit the
Yeah.
record. Okay. Luke, you're on.
In the year 2021, Matt Comagist turned 42.
I'm 42. And it's dark. That's weird if anyone's on YouTube. Everything went black. Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. I'm living in the darkness today. 42-year-old darkness. Space, darkness. That's like today's movie, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I just called it a movie. Is that cool?
We're using the movie as our way in because that's what this podcast is about. But yeah, never do that again.
Anyway, this is Matt.
This is Luke.
Welcome to our sci-fi sanctuary. Oh, I'm back. Okay, I'm watching my own image come in and out. That's kind of exciting.
That's only going to make sense for the 4 people who watch this on YouTube.
That's right. So I'm playing with my own mirror is the point, but that's the thing to do when you're getting into the Hitchhiker's Guide, I think.
So I'm kind of most interested in how this one came to you, Matt, because you're an American and this is super British. But because it's like a staple of British sci-fi, I brought in a guest who I've heard all around the British podcasting scene, across your BitSocket, Two Good Boys, all that sort of thing. I watched him complete Dark Souls. We're joined today by Ritchy Morgan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
and also thanks for it's always nice to have an opportunity to talk at people about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us.
To field your question, I think I probably actually got into this before it was before there was, I guess before I even had a scent for anything British culture. I know I read the book. No, you asked how it came to me first. I think it was the text adventure in the late 80s. Which is, yeah, I remember playing that on my Atari 800 XL, I think. I played the text adventure and then got stuck somewhere, as you do in an 80s text adventure, especially when you're, under 12 years old. Ended up reading the book. And I know, I guess it's still in my parents' house, that kind of fake leather version of like the first 4 books.
Oh, nice.
I mean, they got
is that the one is that the one that looks like a Bible?
Yes, I was about to say it has a very Bible
got the
look.
sort of gold-edged pages. I
Yes, exactly.
I only just became aware of that version recently, but fun enough, in my girlfriend's family, I went to visit my girlfriend's family, and her brother and her dad both have that copy. But apparently, a good few times, every time they were in America, if they were ever reading it in airports or whatever, they would be approached by people who thought that they were sitting reading a Bible.
Yeah,
actually, no, it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, that was my Bible growing up, right? Because I did read it several times. Yeah, I've read the book probably 6 or 7 times. Most recently, about a year and a half ago, I think. So, yeah, my ground floor definitely is the book in this case, and I think it came to me sort of the same way. Again, the gamer, like early gamer stuff, right? And then like kind of comic book culture. I think I might have actually got my Hitchhiker's Bible from like a comic website or something, where I'd get like, back issues of other things, because that's what you had to do in the 80s, right? And
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I got into stuff when I was like 9 years old, and I probably didn't even realize it was like British for like until like 10 years later.
Yeah, you got into this before I was born, so I can't speak.
Yeah. I think
that's quite funny. That I was just reading about it there, and about the film, and how Douglas Adams was kind of quoted when talking about the film that the only character that really ever needed to be English was Arthur Dent. That was it, right? And everyone else could be anyone.
Yeah, I remember always having trouble kind of picturing exactly what Ford Prefect was, right? Of course, in today's movie, we got Moss Stuff, which is not what was in my mind, but Moss Stuff is pretty awesome. So I'm perfectly happy for him to be here.
Yeah, no, I really like I love the casting of the film, actually, and I think again, I mean, obviously none of this would have been taken into consideration, obviously, but when you spend your life loving a book that has multiple versions and you just know every line, and there's a TV version, a radio version, and you've got all these sort of line deliveries, it's really nice when a film brings in someone maybe a bit different or a bit unexpected, and they just take the material and use it in a it all comes to you in a way that you never expected or you never pictured, but in a quite a positive way. And I think that's what the film did a lot for me, I think.
I definitely would say it did that really well with a lot of the visual design.
And
definitely,
it's a very visual film.
I do really like Mos Def's Ford. I feel like Zaphod could have been. He's very similar to the TV Zaphod. At least in his look.
Sam Rockwell. I mean, I loved Sam Rockwell at that point as well. After Galaxy Quest, and I think he did maybe not long done a film. It was a really great film, George Clooney film he did called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind as well. I don't know if you saw that one.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
But I love Sam Rockwell and everything I watched him in. So I was really excited when he was cast as Zaphod for sure. And he's perfect, I think.
When I was growing up, I think I was actually trying to figure out who is the green ball without eyes. Like I think reading it originally, I think in my head book I actually did have that as Zaphod, which doesn't make any sense. So yeah, like with him, I mean, the way he's described in the book too, and the way he shows up in the movie is just so bizarre. It's kind of hard to wrap that around a prepubescent kid's mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's quite difficult to. Strangely enough, it's quite difficult to imagine a character with two heads. Even when you have the television version,
like alternating and stuff.
Which was like, I think that was on. I think that if you get the Blu-ray of the TV version now, there's a clip of them showing it on Tomorrow's World or something like that. It was so futuristic, this sort of vacant, dead-looking animatronic head. But yeah. But I mean, I think to go back to how it came into my life as well, like I think it was one of those things that was like it kind of belonged to my parents' generation. So I used to bother the library quite a lot, my local library, and if they didn't have the book I was looking for, if they didn't have the thing I was looking for, I'd constantly be ordering stuff in from other libraries. So, and I think I got some Red Dwarf novels or something in the library. I remember the librarian sort of giving me a wee sort of like, "Oh, you like that, do you? Well, have a look at this." And he handed me over, and it was like an omnibus version of the first three, I think. And it was I don't know if you know the cover, but there's one that's cover that's like a mirror in a bathroom. I think I might be misremembering this, but it's like a mirror in a bathroom, but inside the mirror is like a big spaceship. And I took it home, and I only managed to read the first one because I was a really slow reader. And eventually the librarian was like, "Have you not read that book yet? Can you please give it back to me?" But when I read the book, and then I remember my mum seeing me holding it, and she was like, "Oh, you need to see they've got the TV version as well." So I went out and found a VHS copy of the TV version. I brought the TV version home, and I sat and watched it with my mum. And she got to the end of it and went, "I'm sorry, I thought it was a lot better." But I was like, I really enjoyed that. I don't know why. I mean, yeah, I think it's so. It kind of stuck with me through my teenage years as well, because then I went off and bought all the other books, and I did a lot of bus travel when I was a student and stuff. So we'd sit and read the books on the bus and all that. So I've read, big ones for me as well. So when the film was announced, it was 2005. It came out, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. I think when sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I will say that when the film initially came out, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I do now. And I think what's happened is I've gotten a little bit older, and I rewatched it recently, and I've just managed to relax a bit about it and accepted it as like another version. Because the wonderful thing about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that every time another version of it is made, it strays from the previous one. And I think it helps that its original incarnation is a radio show rather than a book. Because I think if it was a book, people would be more strict. Whereas if it started as a radio show and Douglas Adams is involved in all of it, then you kind of just you get to a point where you accept that, you know, each version has its own quirks and differences. And so I've come around to the film quite a lot, and I now really enjoy it.
This happened in a window, I believe. Douglas Adams did have a crack at the script before passing on, I believe. So that sort of legitimizes it a little bit as well. So
yeah,
just to straight out plunk on the movie, I guess my main critique would be it's pretty good. It has a bit of a flabby middle sort of thing that the book doesn't have. The book definitely rolls a little better.
The Hamakavula stuff and the going to save Trillian.
Right, because they just land on like the planet that didn't need to be there, but then you'd have like an hour-long movie, I guess. So
I think it's nice. I know exactly what you mean. There's a bit of when you know the source material, they have that moment where it's like, we're going to go to Magrathea, but first we've got two other places to go to. And they even kind of do that in the way that the film plays it. Like, you know, even Zaphod's like, I've got something I've got to do first. So as an audience, you're like, oh, I just want to see Magrathea.
Yeah, it's like, you know, going to the party and it goes, hey, can we drop by the 7-Eleven? You know?
Yeah.
So I will say I'm about to do my plot summary, and I basically was just like, screw it, and left out those two planets completely. But
just to briefly on how I discovered this one. I grew up with parents who were super into sci-fi. So as a kid, we had the videotapes of Red Dwarf, Hitchhikers, a little bit of Doctor Who. I think we even had the audio tapes of the radio player, listened to it in the car.
Oh, nice.
Then I read the books. I think my mum's copies. So I had the first 5, just cheapo paperback ones. So I was very excited when the film came out as well. And I remember initially being very disappointed by it, but then realizing that it's just because I'd already heard all the good jokes. And then I had a friend at school who loved the film and kept quoting the film at me. And I was like, oh, right. I guess this wasn't for me. Like, this is another version of it. I've already had like 3 versions at this point. So of course it's not going to be quite as funny for me.
I've got a friend who loves this movie, but he hasn't read the book, you know?
Yeah. That's who this film's for, right? For the most part.
Yeah. But I guess it was the attempt to kind of bring it to, well, you're asking about the American vibe on this. And I guess that kind of was the main goal of this film, to really bump it over the ocean. Because when I was growing up, it was definitely like, oh, there's that weird thing Matt's into. It's not like my parents weren't into it or anything like that, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's well, I think it's kind of the story of Douglas Adams trying to get the film made is, I mean, it's not a big story, but it seems to be quite a long story. I think I read a quote from him once saying something along the lines of getting a film made is like trying to cook a steak by having everyone breathe on it. Because he was literally trying to get the film made from practically the late 70s right up to the point that he died. Another thing that I only just learned, actually, I was doing a lot of Googling before we came on, is that it was there was an idea, American producers got their hands on it. He was in chats with American producers and Ivan Reitman, his director, and they had talked about the possibility of Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray. And because Dan Aykroyd had brought Ghostbusters to Ivan Reitman, they dropped the whole thing and went with Ghostbusters. So Ghostbusters existing literally stopped an early 80s Hitchhiker's Guide movie, which is mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, but I think I can forgive it for that.
Yeah. Then it took it into sort of the late 90s, and then obviously he died in 2001, and then it got picked up by Hammer and Tongs, Garth, who is or was a music video director. I don't know which part of the world you would have been in around this time, but do you remember the Blur video with Milk Carton, Coffee and TV?
Oh, okay, there. That
You know that song?
the animated one, right?
Yeah. It's like the little milk carton that leaves home and sort of goes into the big city, and
Yeah.
it was on our MTV2 all of the time. But anyway, I know he directed that video and he did some other ones. He does sort of quite nice, very visual stuff, which kind of translates into the film a wee bit as well, actually, because it is an incredibly visual film. And it must have been difficult as well, because I think when you look at the source material, especially when you sort of take it right back to the radio version, Hitchhiker's Guide is sort of very much just a series of scenes. It's almost like sketches that are kind of connected. The scenes are quite, we spend a long time here and then we spend a long time here, and I kind of appreciate that the bit in the middle now, even though you're right, it does, as someone who knows it, it's a bit of a but when we have the whole thing about the gun, and then the gun leads to the resolution, and all ties together quite nicely. But I know that one of the things Douglas Adams wanted to do was he wanted to make it that nice, family-friendly, kind of Americanized movie, which I think if you took any other British property, sci-fi or otherwise, and Americanized that wee bit, everyone would be furious.
I seem to recall everyone was.
Yeah. I think you're right, actually. I'm trying to remember the reaction myself.
I definitely remember my parents did not like this film. And like my mum is definitely the reason I'm into Hitchhikers. Oh, the reason I've worn my Tottenham shirt today is because this is one for the YouTube viewers.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh well. Did
the video just drop?
Yeah, peace out to the YouTube viewers.
I was going to show you that the number 42 is on the back of my shirt.
Oh.
Okay, well,
it does not want me to show my back, because there you go, I'm back.
Okay.
Stay.
Tell people about the bizarre. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
the strangely the bizarre coincidence of today. Well, sorry, yesterday for you and today for me. About how the first book was published today, 42 years ago.
Yeah, it's a repeating number. Synchronicities abound, right?
Yeah.
Hope everyone has their towel nearby.
I always keep my towel next to my bed, Matt.
All right. All I have are house pants. I guess it could be kind of like a towel if need be.
Anything or any port in a storm.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do a quick kind of plot summary then, which shouldn't be too long because I just chopped out the middle we were talking about. But off to the races. Arthur Dent is getting prepped for another Thursday, but as luck would have it, bulldozers are set to take down his house to make way for a new bypass. Arthur's pal, Ford Prefect, suggests that they just head to the pub for a few pints to get ready for the journey ahead. As it turns out, Prefect is a stranded alien who is aware that the entire Earth is about to be destroyed to make way for an interstellar bypass. The two hitch a ride on a Vogon construction vessel, are subjected to Vogon poetry, and are thrust out into the cold darkness of deep space, where they are improbably picked up by the Heart of Gold, a cutting-edge space vessel that has been commandeered by the president of the galaxy, Zaphod Beeblebrox. Also on board is Trillian, the manic pixie dream girl that Dent couldn't handle at a past party, and a very depressed android named Marvin. They are on the search for the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. They know the answer is 42, as laid out by millions of years of processing by a supercomputer called Deep Thought, but they don't know what the question is. The group eventually discovers that the planet-building world of Magrathea, and planet designers started Bartflist. It seems that the recently destroyed Earth was actually a carefully planned machine meant to discover what the question was, but it was carelessly destroyed by the Vogons just before completing its goal. Fortunately, a second Earth is ready to be put into motion, and there is a place for Arthur there. Choosing adventure instead, Arthur refuses stay on the new Earth and instead sets course for the restaurant at the end of the universe with his heart of gold crewmates. Okay.
Nice.
I did
Well
coach
done.
Matt on these British pronunciations beforehand, but
I'm gonna give 6 a.m. a bit of that too. I was
yeah.
and reading this notepad. I typed it into notepad like an imbecile. So I always use note. Why do I use notepad?
I mean, I usually message it to you on Messenger, so I've got it on my phone. So that's better than mine.
Yeah. Okay.
Slarty Bart first is a mouthful at the best of times.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say it, it seems like you're drunk and slurring your words. So when you say it properly, you know.
Speaking of drunk and slurring your words, I don't regularly miss the UK, but just the sight of a nice country pub and a big crisp pint. I really felt like a pint last night.
And the peanuts.
Yeah. Yeah, here it would be something weird.
Yeah, America, we just have the scum bars. I remember because they had the fake pub when a few miles away from my parents' house, and that was amazing. But generally, it's punk dives where I ended up in my going out at night days.
Right, yeah, well, I used to go to the Rose and Crown or the King's Head, and it was exactly like this pub. So
yeah, the opening, of the film is pretty much bang on everything that we remember, isn't it? The thing I quite like about it is is some of the small details, like they've given Steve Pemberton the Genghis Khan mustache because in the book they have that whole bit about how that character's a descendant of Genghis Khan.
right.
But yeah, no, I like that. I also really love how in the book, in the TV version, the radio one, when he goes into the pub, he buys everyone a pint, and he buys like 6 pints or something, and he says, "Keep the change," and he's like, "What from a fiver?" He's obviously been upgraded to 50 quid in the
inflation.
That's how much 6 pints would cost now. So
it is interesting though how we were talking about how each iteration is so different, but the first, we'll say 30 minutes of the story, 30 pages of the book, in all versions, the BBC version, the radio version, it's very similar up until Vogon Poetry is unleashed.
Yeah,
that's where all the trails kind of go in different directions, I guess.
I do love that, all of that stuff. I mean, even when I thought I didn't like the film, I still loved all of that stuff at the beginning. That shot when it pulls back to reveal all the ships surrounding the planet, but the fact that it goes on for so long is hilarious.
Yeah,
and
that was great.
Regardless of how I felt about the film, I always got tingles when the theme tune, the Eagles song, comes in and the book appears. It's great.
Yeah, I was very glad they used the music. It's only a little, but
yeah,
it meant that it felt like it fit the lineage of the radio show, the TV show, and now the movie.
What do you think about them bringing Earth back at the end?
I think they do sort of do that, but it takes until like book 5 or something, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about Americanizing it and family friendlyizing it. If you think about it, starting the film with destroying the Earth and everyone apart from 2 people is insanely dark, and the film chooses to ignore that for the most part. So maybe they did feel like, we can't have audiences looking at the cinema and Earth is destroyed.
Are we all dead?
It is funny that because they make it a whole thing for Trillian as well, and there's this sort of she has a sort of an emotional moment with it, and it gives her a reason to get annoyed at Zaphod as well, and so they have sort of, you're right, it's all about kind of making it a bit more of a film, really, isn't it? And I think the ending, I think that works for me as well, definitely.
Well, you talked about how the other versions sort of feel like sketches in a way.
Yeah, they sort of they don't ramble, but they're quite chaotic.
Right, because it's pure comedy.
Yeah.
which is why. And whereas for a film, you do have to have a little more of a heart than just be. I mean, otherwise you'd end up with Airplane, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's just every line is just a joke and there's nothing to latch onto, which is it's fun in its own way, but I don't think it's what this needed to be.
I hope if you're happy for me to read it, but I've got this short passage from that I find really, really interesting from Doctor Who and the Cricket Men.
Okay.
Which is an adaptation of a lost Doctor Who movie script that was written by Douglas Adams, which then later became the third Hitchhiker's Guidebook. So there's like what is it? So it's like a pitch document or presentation for a film, for a Doctor Who film. But he talks a lot about science fiction cinema, right? So, one, science fiction in films. It is a question of getting the angle right. It has been tried many times unsuccessfully because the concepts are usually earthbound and based on reworkings of the 1984 vision of the future. For example, Logan's Run, Soylent Green, etc. This is probably because the average non-sci-fi reading member of the public probably sees sci-fi as being gloomy extrapolations of present tendencies towards totalitarianism. Verdict, boring. Even I, as a science fiction fan, did not go to see them. 2, the Apollo space program rather took the carpet out from under the feet of the old space opera type of film, which used to pay no lip service at all to what do we actually know about space and space travel. Science fiction must not ignore what we already know. It can go way beyond it on fantastic flights of fancy, but the structure of the fantastic must be logical. And this is a lot of the beauty of science fiction, the wild fantasies that can be created from imaginatively logical extrapolations of what we already know. For instance, it's completely unacceptable in modern sci-fi to talk of spaceships traveling faster than light because Einstein must be taken into account. However, theories of hyperspace which allow instantaneous transposition are acceptable. In other words, current knowledge can be argued against, but not thrown out of the window. Again, black holes are a marvelous area for fantasy, but it must be informed fantasy. Anything a writer invents about black holes must take into account the arguments put forward by the theorists. Don't worry, there's not much more. A science fiction audience wants to make the suspension of disbelief, and you must allow him to do that by not insulting his intelligence. However, this does not in any way preclude the adventure romp like Doctor Who, Harry Harrison, etc., which is one of the brightest and best areas of sci-fi because it can be so outrageous in its fantasy, but the fun and the skill of it is the main maintenance of inner logic. All of the best wild ideas in surreal comedy, science fiction, spy thrillers, etc. adhere to a strict inner logic. Without logic, there is no surprise, no joy. And then there's just a bit about, I'll read the last bit. One is concerned a great deal with problems and their solutions. The trick is to find your solution within the framework of the logic you have constructed. In many ways, James Bond films illustrate some of the points excellently, and in any attempts to make a Doctor Who films should be done very much in the light of what the Bond films have achieved, and they're outrageously structured. I suppose this is why I've always mistrusted the term science fantasy as opposed to science fiction, because it suggests a lack of logical construction. So he talks a lot about, what's interesting about this as well, sorry, is that the author of the book has pointed out that he's clearly written this before Star Wars came out. But yeah, I mean, he's clear, like it's chaotic and it's mad, but it all still adheres to like a logic, which I think is the how Hitchhiker's Guide works, because it's absurdity, but it makes sense. It's absurdity that makes sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what makes it so unique, is that it's not comedy from having no logic. It's comedy from just constantly taking logic too far.
Mm-hmm.
It's
like the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was going to say the bureaucracy of the Vogons destroying Earth. I really love the idea of Earth as a computer. I've always loved that as well. And I love it more as it becomes more like, I always think of Twitter as like a giant computer. Like, because it really is, like, you throw any problem at it and throw it back at you eventually.
Plus
That will
Nazis.
come- No, yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't do it particularly. It's like that AI that they had to shut down because it became racist.
Yeah.
But still, it is kind of like that, and I think that's I love that wonderful idea of Earth being a computer. Kind of, it's
No.
becoming. I feel like it's becoming more and more.
You bring this up now, which is something I was going to mention later, but I feel like one of the problems with this film version it was made at exactly the wrong time. If it had been made just a little bit earlier, then the whole idea of the Hitchhiker's Guide is pure science fiction. And if it had been made 10 years later, then yeah, we do all walk around with basically a Hitchhiker's Guide in our pockets now. Yeah. Whereas it was made right when we were starting to have cell phones, like Arthur Dent even has one, but they weren't quite there yet. Yeah. So what was the Hitchhiker supposed to be? And that's why it's kind of really realized in that. I like that it's a book that opens up and then it's the screen in the middle, but
yeah. Well, it's funny because it's kind of, I'm trying to think when the first iPad was and all that as well, but it is maybe just a year or so out, because it literally is at a tipping point before we turn into things like social media and tablets and smartphones and all that sort of stuff. I mean, yeah, you're right. They did. There is he's got they would have been calling it a camera phone at that. It blows my mind that was 16 years ago.
My camera is also a phone.
I want to get this off my chest. I hate that this seems to only happen in British stuff. TV shows still use the phrase camera phone now. And like, no one says that because every phone has a camera. But there'll be episodes of Sherlock or something from like 3 or 4 years ago where it's like, oh, she was carrying a camera phone. No one says camera phone.
This dovetails a little bit with another podcast I did. I think on the Kids Guide to the Internet, but I did hear my wife use the term "I'm surfing the net" yesterday. So that kind of blew my mind. Granted, English is not her first language, but
no. I still get a kick out of if I log on to Discord with my friends being like, "Oh, I'm jacking into cyberspace," but you know, I'm doing it deliberately.
No.
I'm jacked in, son.
You still internally say "I'm in" when you log into something.
Yeah. Let me tell you, she hates it.
You just have to pretend you're the hacker. You just did a password, but it's like, I'm a hacker. Like 90s style hacker. Yeah.
I made my password 90 characters long, so I can just sit there typing like I think I'm a
hacker. Let's have a quick run through the actors here. This is, I guess, before Martin Freeman was really a thing. I remember, like, who is this guy?
Shortly post office, sorry.
Post the office.
Post the office.
Yeah. He was not working in an actual office at the time, I think. But yeah, I guess one of the things that I don't think I saw this in the theater, probably partly because at the time I was like, who's that? You know? And again, this we talked about in the final cut. This would have been my first year in Japan, where I was not completely keyed into pop culture that year. So
yeah, I mean, Martin Freeman, he seems like a perfect Arthur Dent. But yeah, I don't know, something's just a bit off with him in this film. He seems either he's a little too young to be playing the role yet, or it's just the fact that he has zero chemistry with Trillian. But
one of the problems is that, like, I feel like Arthur Dent, this brings it again into what you were saying about, like, the timing of when it was made. But, like, what makes Simon Jones, I always get Simon Peters, the book, Simon's Arthur, right? Simon Jones. So Simon Jones, who plays Arthur Dent in the radio and the TV version, is just so, like, just that really kind of squeaky, posh sounding English middle class, just to be, like, really far too out of his depth, and, like, him being who he is makes it more comical, whereas Martin Freeman is a bit more everyman, even though he still plays it up to be the sort of the awkward Englishman, but he's not as out there as what you remember Arthur Dent being, which again is just, I think it's just one of those things is like making it a bit more, I don't know if that makes it better for an American audience, or an American audience would have enjoyed it being a little bit too incredibly English. I don't know.
But then maybe for an
few
American
part way.
audience, there wouldn't have been a single point of view character at that point.
Yeah.
You've got like I guess, yeah, it would have been Trillian at that point because you've got two aliens and a weird Brit.
They do play
Yes.
her up more, though. I mean, this is pretty much, I mentioned the manic pixie dream girl in the summary because this seems to be pretty much the core of that vibe, at least on the movies.
Yeah, she's well, the thing is, it's like the film as well. I was thinking, watching the film, like they've given Trillian something to do. Which again makes it a bit different from the previous versions, but no, she is. I don't know if that was a trend. I can't remember if that was just a trend at the time, but there was like a period where she was everywhere, wasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, I like Zooey Deschanel. I just didn't necessarily like her in this, but I think part of it is just like, obviously they only have a brief encounter, I think, before the start of the film.
Yeah.
So Arthur's sort of jealousy towards her just comes across as kind of creepy and lame.
Yes, he's a bit unlikable in places with it, isn't he? It's like,
and I don't feel like previous versions were in the same way.
His arc of being sort of cowardly to a hero doesn't quite play off as well as it should. He just seems like a bit he seems a bit unlikable.
Yeah, so I didn't really feel like they had chemistry. I just felt like you often get with this kind of character where he's a bit of a geek and he's in love with someone out of his depth. He kind of comes across as a creep in this. And at the end, when she realizes she likes him, I was like, really? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there aren't many other OG humans out there, so
yeah, true.
Last man on Earth syndrome.
That was another interesting thing about watching the film, is seeing the party, the fabled party, because that's not in the old versions either. But like when you watch it in a film, you'd swear that you've seen it.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess
because the line about I love Sam Rockwell's delivery of like, is this guy boring you? Why don't you come with me? I'm from a different planet. I've heard that line so many times, and his delivery of it is bang on. I really love. This will probably come across quite a lot, but I really love Sam Rockwell.
I was about to say, let's talk about where the casting really did hit the mark with him. I know one of my friends, when the 4 years of Trump started, he just keep referring to Zaphod Beeblebrox, specifically this film version, all the time as we got Zaphod now, so
yeah. Yeah, no, so I thought Sam Rockwell was good, sort of, because he had to be a kind of like charismatic kind of rock star type almost, and but also a complete idiot. Yeah, I thought, I mean, I don't really have too much more to say about him because he's just great. I think he plays it really, really well, and also like that slightly threatening way where he's a bit of a dick as well. That's great.
Yeah, he's again, at the moment, this is the freshest version of Hitchhikers in my head because I basically haven't read or seen any of it since I left home. So I don't remember Zaphod being quite as antagonistic in the other versions.
I think he didn't really get on with Arthur. Him
Right.
and Arthur didn't like each other just because he always referred to him as an ape and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. The cast. The one thing I noticed as well is the cast. Going back, there's so many people that I didn't notice, like Jason Schwartzman's weird uncredited cameo as Gag Halfront, the psychiatrist in the news report, and the news reporter is Kelly MacDonald.
yeah.
So yeah, it's I think there was a lot of people before they did much bigger things, maybe as well.
I think actually the entire cast is great. It's just that chemistry between Arthur and Julian is what let it down for me. Because again, like I said, I think if you take Hobbit era Martin Freeman and put him in this film, he'd be perfect as Arthur Dent.
Okay.
He just hadn't quite mastered that awkward Britishness yet in this. because they're the scenes where he's like dealing with the dwarves and stuff in those movies. He's basically doing the middle class awkward Brit thing.
Of course, because since then he's had such a massive career, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Like what with Fargo and, like you said, The Hobbit, and all sorts.
And yeah, we just left out 5 things there. So I guess the star power of this film is, burning a little brighter than it did when it came out. Not that it had up and comers. I guess again we mentioned. Well, hell, we didn't even mention Alan Rickman, who's voicing Marvin, right? So,
Right.
Yeah, he's great as well.
I also really like that Marvin design. I guess we'll get into design a little more later, but that's just a fun robot. It doesn't look like any other robot I've seen.
Yeah. This movie is definitely like, I can't think of anything that looks bad. So that's certainly a big plus. Maybe it looks different than my head canon, but that's fine, because how could anything match that, right?
Yeah.
Be surprising if it did.
Alan Rickman's, he was that was another piece of casting that I love. I mean, I love when a piece of casting, especially when it's something that you know really well, comes from like completely left field and it's someone that surprises you, but also at the same time when someone says Alan Rickman is the voice of Marvin, you're just like, yes.
Yeah, of course.
It's like when Robert Downey Jr. was cast as Tony Stark. You're like, yes, absolutely.
And then Moss stuff is definitely not what you would expect for the casting there, but he's pretty good. I remember him basically. I know he's been in more stuff, but for me, it's what Be Kind, Rewind, and this are the ones I think of with him.
Yeah, no, he comes across as just really lovely and great. And like him having the American accent does sort of make the joke. I did suspect, suspecting you weren't from Guildford after all. It hits a little harder that time.
Yeah. He's great in this, but the same as you, Matt, I can't think of anything other than those 2 films that I've seen him in. And looking at his IMDb, it's all pretty indie, the other stuff he's done.
He's primarily a rapper, I think.
That's definitely his bread and butter. And he was kind of dabbling with the acting.
Apparently he's in quite a few of the Fast and Furious films, so I don't remember who he was in those.
What?
like which, like the early ones, the later ones?
He's in like
all of them?
The first one and the 7th one, apparently.
Oh. Okay. That's weird.
And I've watched those films back to back many times. So.
Completely failed to notice that.
Yep.
There are lots of people in those movies, to be fair.
Yeah.
And the film expects you to remember all of them.
It's like forgetting who your family is, man.
The 9th Fast and Furious film, the whole film is just, oh, I know a guy. And then the camera cuts to a guy. And that's every scene of the film.
It cuts to a guy, and then you as the audience go, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
So it's like the begat part of the Bible. So-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so. We'll shift gears to the design. Luke, you were about to burst forth with a design point, I think.
I just love all the spheres in this film. You don't see enough orbs in films, I think. But
yeah, it's better in the movie Sphere, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's funny that the Heart of Gold has a sort of almost like a tea plate looking China tea design. It's kind of odd. Because in the book, it's meant to be shaped like, I could never, again, this is something in writing that I could never ever picture, but it's meant to look like a tennis shoe.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how you would do that for real.
Hold on a second. I'm just gonna grab something. Hold on.
Well, you get a green screen and put a.
Gonna grab a tennis shoe.
A Heart of Gold or a tennis shoe. That's gonna be my guess.
Or the book, I guess. You could be getting another reading.
Could be the same thing.
I don't know what editions of the book that you have, but was it these ones?
No, I think mine was a little more recent than those.
So they all have 4 different pictures on them. But if you
Okay.
stick them all together, I'm not going to be able to do this on camera. If you stick them all together, this
Okay.
one is meant to be. I feel like a child that's showing off. The
Right,
shoe,
but yeah, there you
the
go.
shoe in the middle is meant
Oh.
to be the heart of gold. You see?
Okay, so it is a shoe.
Well,
That's-
they do. When it uses the drive, they have it transform into a bunch of stuff. So
Yeah.
I can't remember now, but I bet one of them was a shoe like that.
Yeah, you're just catching a moment of the book cover is just a moment in the heart of gold, right? So
Yeah.
every moment counts out.
The improbability drive stuff gave a good opportunity for all that music video visuals that the director was used to. Definitely, because obviously the improbability drive again in the book was this really weird sequence that again was just really difficult to try and picture, but it was the whole thing about his legs flowing away from him and the looking like a penguin and all that sort of stuff. But instead in the film it's just like I think I've turned into a sofa. And then they have the sequence where they're all made of wool and Arthur throws up all the colored wool and all that sort of stuff.
That just proves I've heard that something like 80% of people get sick within their first 12 hours in space, so it makes sense.
Imagine what zero G vomit looks like.
Not great. I hope Jeff Bezos got sick.
Into his own helmet.
Yep.
What else do we got? We got Arthur's Dent's house. Looks pretty plain. Okay.
We got the Vogon ships. I remember when we were talking about High Life, how you don't see spaceships that are just big cuboids, or you do here.
Yeah, well, the Vogons don't have enough creativity to go past cube.
Yeah, all of the Vogon stuff was lovely and grimy and sort of grim. It was that nice sort of, it's grim but it looks great.
Yeah.
Well,
I love the mic dropping from the ceiling and all that sort of stuff as well.
We just did 12 Monkeys, and it's like, yeah, this is very Gilliam on this little ship here. Like, it just turns into a Terry Gilliam film for 5 minutes.
I was surprised that like the Vogon soldiers all seem to be in gimp outfits.
Oh yeah.
That was bizarre, but it kind of worked.
That very much feels like we've run out of money to do fully skinned Vogons. So, just do these gimp outfit ones. I did like them using the resistance is useless as the catchphrase for all the drone ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of like a smellier Borg with worse poetry, I guess. So
flying about in big cubes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then everything in the final act looked absolutely incredible when they're on like the planet building facility.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
That was just amazing. Even watching it again in 2021.
Yeah, that's well used digital, because I do talk smack about digital here and there, and that's how we use CGI correctly, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also by constantly keeping the characters in shot, it sells it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're
like,
seeing everything from Arthur's point of view.
It does. It sells the scale really well.
Yeah.
Like I feel. Yeah, no, it's great because it's like I love the line. It's like, it scares the willies out of me. But like, yeah, it really does. Like you sort of, there's a slight feeling of vertigo in your legs and everything as you're watching it. It's great. Definitely love that. I love the bit as well. I love the bit when they get in the cart and it does the ghost train thing of one cart coming out. You know how it looks like a ride at the fairground.
Yeah,
plays the sound. Yeah, no, that's good. There's lots of just little, so many little touches, and yeah, the attention to detail is incredible. It's almost like the attention to detail is probably they lost something else somewhere along the lines because they were so busy looking at how great the film looked.
Well, it's like how Christopher Nolan ended up with his own corn farm after making Interstellar. You know, the makers of Hitchhikers ended up with their own Earth at the end.
Well, if they did, I want to go live on that one.
Yeah, the poetry's worse.
I like the little shuttle, the Heart of Gold shuttle. It was like a small red
Yeah.
mini one. I enjoyed the chaos of them trying to drive it. It felt like it might have been improvised. All that, trying to find the little steering wheel and the
that shuttle and its controls was pure Starbug.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
they painted Starbug red and chopped the back part off, and there you go.
It did feel like that when they're trying to fly Blue Midget and they're all pissed.
Yeah. Or when Crichton was taking driving lessons.
Yeah. Exactly.
These are Red Dwarf references for the listeners who didn't pick up on that.
But yeah, I mean, Red Dwarf is a very close cousin.
I was going to say, I'd imagine the listeners who are listening to the Hitchhikers episode probably know Red Dwarf.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be neighbors in the neighborhood of science fiction where every house is a different franchise.
It is funny that they are so close, like you said, but the style of humor is completely
different. Yeah,
different. It's wild.
Well, Red Dwarf's humor, it doesn't have to be sci-fi. It could be set anywhere.
That's true. Yeah.
Whereas Hitchhiker's humor all comes from, like we said, taking these sci-fi ideas to the crazy logical conclusion.
Although I would argue the first two series of Red Dwarf is a little more in line with Hitchhiker's sort of humor. It's got that kind of darker vibe, I guess. The pre-Crichton stuff, it gets very existentially, dread-like. So
yeah, and you've got a lot, all the sort of atheist stuff, which is a big thing in Hitchhikers as well.
I mean, I just the whole gazpacho soup thing seems very Douglas Adams. Like you've ruined your entire career because you served gazpacho soup hot.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Yeah, no, definitely. It's those sorts of ideas of like, especially. I mean, for something like the early days of Red Dwarf, where it's just they're on a spaceship and it's like all you've got, and you've got no budget. You've got is these sort of relatable ideas. But yeah,
that's the BBC version of this as well, which I haven't seen for 30 years, but I do remember the double VHS case for it for some reason. So
what's amazing is it is very dated. It's very of its time. But when all you have to do is watch any Doctor Who from 1980, and you realize how impressive Hitchhiker's Guide is, because it's visually it's amazing. Like I think once you get past the style of it being of its time, it is incredible, and all the computer graphic stuff is great, and the soundtrack's lovely, and yeah.
I do think maybe that BBC thing's one of the first movies I really went seeking out on my own, because it did, especially in the States, it required a bit of a search at the time. So,
well, the thing I really love about the TV version, and I guess the radio version before they did the later ones, is the ending. I think it's a great ending. I love how it goes in a big circle, and Arthur and Ford end up back on prehistoric Earth. But then it also turns out that humans have evolved from these like telephone cleaners and all that sort of stuff. All these sort of idiots from another planet. Basically, there's this crashed ark. But I love that as an ending. I love it as a circle because it does go with the whole Hitchhiker's Guide idea. It's that, like you said, it was like about it being kind of atheist and all that sort of stuff as well. It's like nothing really has any meaning. It just toddles along and it's chaotic, and it, but also it's a great. I just feel it's a great place to end it.
I thought back in 2005, I really loved the atheist part of it. Looking back on it now, it's all a little bit embarrassing and Richard Dawkinsy. But
I know. Well, I mean, thankfully, it doesn't play it up too hard, and
no, I think
it doesn't do it as smugly as
it
as,
feels
God
a
is
bit like it
not
does.
great.
It feels like it does a little bit just because it is Stephen Fry. So I associate a lot of other Stephen Fry stuff with it.
Well, you know
but
that
actually, what is there in the film isn't too preachy, for lack of a better word.
Because they just couldn't have it in the film. The scene about the Babelfish proving the non-existence of God it's on the DVD, but it was in the film up until a late stage. So the version you see on the DVD is fully animated and ready to go. But obviously, like we cannot put this in a film that we're going to send to America. Don't be
right.
That don't play down south.
So
yeah, it's one of those things because I went through that teenage phase of like, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, and that makes me so smart. And then I'm just like, yeah, I don't really care.
You don't believe in anything.
Douglas Adams and Richard Dawkins were like good pals.
Yeah, I think I did know that.
Because Richard Dawkins is married to Lalla Ward, who was on Doctor Who when he was working on it. And he introduced her to Richard Dawkins, and then that's how so they became good pals after that, apparently. So I think the book at the party that he's reading is by Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
There's lots of weird little references like that. Apparently, I've just been sitting reading on Google. The great thing about Google is like you read it all and then you come on a podcast and say them all, and everyone's like, "This guy knows a lot about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy."
To be honest, when you asked for Hitchhikers, and knowing you from as much as I do from other podcasts, I assumed you were going to know a lot about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So.
Did you think when you asked me it was going to be Doctor Who?
No, I did it because what are we going to do? The 96 movie or Daleks Invasion Earth?
Oh, yeah.
We already tried that route.
I do really like Dalek Invasion Earth, but Matt insisted that we do Doctor Who and the Daleks first, even though that was crap.
That one's pretty rough.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that quote of Douglas Adams talking about what a Doctor Who film has to be.
Mm-hmm.
When they did finally make a Doctor Who movie, it had terrible internal consistency because at the end of the film, he goes back in time and just brings everyone back to life.
I know.
It was like it was the one bit of Doctor Who that doesn't do that.
That's a
the Paul McGann one.
Oh, right, okay. I don't think I've actually watched that, so.
I don't think I have since it aired.
Okay,
it's worth a revisit now that the new version exists.
Yeah, I'm sure it was more painful when it felt like that was all we were getting.
Well, that was the thing when it came out at the time. It was just like, "Oh, this is it," and it's now it's failed.
Yeah,
so it's not coming back. But now you can go back and watch it as a sort of strange little Saturday afternoon oddity.
Meanwhile, the Roger Corman Fantastic Four just keeps getting more and more depressing because they just keep screwing that up over and over again.
Yeah. Oh. So anyway, sorry, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I would have been interested to see what they would have done with a sequel, but I can't imagine, because it's like, that script that they used for that film, they went on Douglas Adams's last draft and then gave it some adjustments with, and I can't remember the name of the writer, but all I can remember is that he wrote Chicken Run. But I read a big interview with him at the time, and he was saying that like we just had to make some adjustments and changes, and just somebody has to do that. But all of the new stuff that was in it was from Douglas Adams's previous draft, so he wasn't even inventing new stuff. It was just, I'm just here to like smooth it out a bit.
But I
So if
wonder
we made
if
another one, it would have to have gone.
yeah, it would have had to have been written by someone else. Did you ever read the sixth book, the Owen Colfer one?
I tried.
Yeah.
I don't even think I made it to the fifth.
Well, I do remember even the real books were a bit diminishing returns.
I do remember the second and third being definitely.
I remember the original trilogy being fantastic.
Yeah.
And I don't remember liking the fourth and fifth very much. I think I read them, but I didn't like them as much.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I just love them all, but I know what you mean. I've got fewer fond memories of as it moves on.
But it might also just be that, you know, it is the same kind of humor, and it can only be fresh for so long, right?
Yeah. I think the thing about the anyone trying to follow up as well, and I had the same thing with this Cricket Men book. It took me a wee while to get settled into it, but I actually ended up really enjoying it. But is when someone tries to write as Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like they tried to write in his style, and it falls flat for me, basically.
But
I think it's I got a block in my head because I know that it's not him.
Right. Yeah. I think the reason for me the book is the ultimate version of Hitchhikers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Douglas Adams' writing is so good and so funny.
Yeah.
So in a film, you know, Arthur Dent just walks down a corridor. But in the book, even a line about him walking down the corridor is some play on words or some joke or something.
Yeah.
You can't do that in any other medium.
Yeah. I find this a lot with like I think about it with Discworld as well, but it's a lot of what you love about it, like you said, it's the wordplay. And the thing about that kind of wordplay as well is that it works best on a page. Like, see the line about how the Vogon ship's floating in the sky exactly the way that bricks don't is always going to be the most hilarious when you read it off a printed page. To me, right. I think anyway. This is getting into me sounding really pretentious, but what I'm trying to say is that sometimes when a source material is treated with such incredible reverence and they try and translate it directly, it never. Because they usually end up, like I always found it with the Discworld stuff, it's like they always end up with a narrator because they try and get in all those jokes in as well. But so they just have to have someone reading them while the action's happening.
Well, the good thing about Hitchhiker is it's got a built-in way you can do that and get away with it.
Yes.
Because you've got the book.
But yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean because I had the same thought as well. It's and I think I again, like looking back at the film, going back to it and like really enjoying it. I think it does a really, really good job of something that's must be an incredibly challenging source material.
I wonder if the reason the middle section drags a bit is because it was like Douglas Adams' last addition to the film. They felt like they couldn't touch it. And maybe it did need shortening or reducing or tightening up.
They're like, hey, we got this original sequence from the man himself. And
yeah. Perhaps if he'd been alive or if they treated it with slightly less reverence, they would have been like, oh, this is a bit long. Let's change this a little bit. And whereas maybe they felt like we have to keep it as he's written it.
It does feel, I mean, I guess, again, they were probably thinking of sequels when they were doing this sort of stuff. But like the fact that the Hamakavilla stuff doesn't really go anywhere. He just sort of appears in the middle of the film and then we bugger off. I feel like he probably would have been back in a sequel or whatever. But because he isn't, and there isn't a sequel, we just have this. This bit in the middle that gets us
journey.
That gets us the gun that solves the problem at the end of the film. Which, to be fair, I think I love that as a solution as well. I love the gun. I love Marvin. It's just one of those perfect when the plot points come together. It's slow motion reveal, and Marvin's got the gun, and it's when it all clicks in your head right before it happens. You're like, Marvin's going to shoot the gun, right?
Yeah. That stuff's all great.
So I guess we already somewhat said we're coming down on this one is aged reasonably well. Like it's probably better watching it now than in 2005?
I think it's if the listener exists who's got this far and doesn't already know Hitchhikers, I think the film is great as a way in.
Mhm.
But I think it's just, if you're already immersed and you love the radio show and the books and the movies, then it's great to see all these visuals and it's great to see it brought to life. But you already know all the good jokes.
Yeah.
So you've got to go into it accepting that and knowing that that's coming.
Something
But you're
weird
right.
with this. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you're right. I mean, I think if you're, but in another sense, if you do love it, if you love it the way that we've loved it, it is great to see just the design. Like it's such a visual film, from a really visual director. It's just such a great thing to see those takes on those ships and those characters and those aliens and all that sort of stuff. So there's that bonus as well, I think. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like it is when you've got a television version that's quite dated, you've got a radio version selling radio plays to, well, it's more of a thing now, actually.
I was wondering if anyone
had
put it up as like a podcast or anything, because I'd probably give it another listen.
It must. I bet it's on Audible or something like that.
Yeah.
I actually just got. I managed to pick up a vinyl copy a few months ago. I've yet to sit and listen to it.
See,
I'm very excited about that.
I want to listen to it while I'm out hiking, so I don't think vinyl copy would do the trick.
Oh.
I feel like this movie, though, which is weird because it is, based on those older source materials, but it feels like a very 2005-y time capsule somehow, looking back on it. Like it's just like we said, it's made exactly when it was made, and it looks like it and it feels like it. The only thing that I think would push that button harder is something I have not watched for quite a while, but I feel like if I watched the pilot for Lost again, I would hit that button a little harder. But
You want to hit that button harder? Go and look up the trailer.
Oh right.
My God. It's the most 2005 thing. It's incredible.
I guess it ekes into the movie, and it's not a criticism. Sometimes it's perfectly fine to be of your time. So again, well, you were reading it, but Logan's Run is the most 1975 thing ever, right? So
yeah.
Well, I think I mean, this is what I always say about science fiction, and this is not an original take or anything, but like I love the thing that I love about science fiction is that it's a representation of the time it was made, and the idea. Like I think it shows sometimes it shows a more honest picture of the time that it was from than, say, like a standard drama,
Right.
Just in terms of its design ideas, its ideas of what the future is, or it's all that sort of stuff, or what what people think are going to happen, what people's hopes are. So yeah, I don't want sci-fi to be timeless. I want it to be absolutely of its time.
Well, I remember, and it was just like the BBC Three After documentary of an episode of Doctor Who, and one of the designers saying, if you try and make your sci-fi look timeless, it's going to look shit.
Yeah.
Just make sci-fi that you would make today, and it's going to look real.
Yeah.
Which goes back to that quote, I suppose. So
yeah.
Tying a nice bow on all of that. Any other big thoughts you want to throw out on the Hitchhikers in general, but I guess specifically the movie?
I don't necessarily have any more on the movie. I will say I keep seeing recently this thing about like, oh, the reason it's 42 is because Douglas Adams was into computers and in binary or whatever when you write 40. No, it's not. It's just a joke because it's a number that means nothing.
No, I did read that he spent ages thinking of different numbers. He tried to come up with the funniest number, and I think 42 has the best. I mean, in the accent and everything, you think 42 is like the best.
I hope he road tested that in some clubs, show up on the stage. It's like 69. That didn't get the laugh I expected. Okay, 42, and the crowd goes wild. And I have my knee-jerk reaction for, we're teachers. So when a kid asks, what's your favorite number? I'm always like, my favorite number is 268. The less pause, the better, right?
See, I always say 42 if a kid asks me that question. So
no, that's just
no, I was just a question that I have is that, so apparently Hulu are making a series, like a television version, a series of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Whether or not that's still happening, I don't know. But how do you think, if, or even if that wasn't happening and a film was happening now, how do you think they would approach it? Because it's funny that's, like you were saying earlier about how all of the some of the things that are really unusual about it are now no longer unusual.
I hope that the one thing I hope they can do is that they feel they can make changes and make adaptations. I think anything, if you're moving it to another medium, you have to make it work for that medium.
Yeah.
And like, even though it's been a TV series before, TV is a very different beast now. So I hope that we're far enough removed from Douglas Adams that they feel like, okay, let's write a version that works for today. And maybe they do lean into the fact that The Hitchhiker's Guide itself does kind of reflect social media. Obviously, I don't want it to be full of jokes about like, oh, it's space Twitter or whatever. But like, I'm sure there's something interesting that could be said there. And I hope they make an effort to say that.
Do you know what I always thought was my sort of kind of alternate universe headcanon version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, just purely based on the Ford and Arthur relationship,
Right.
was Peep Show.
Yeah, that works.
I always think of those two characters. They're almost like a sort of Arthur and Ford. Just
actually,
you've got it there already.
Like that middle class energy David Mitchell has, that much stronger than Martin Freeman.
Yeah,
I don't think.
Maybe they need a sitcom. That's how you can go.
I think they could be a lot more cynical in their comedy today. Like that need to family friendlyize it and Americanize it is a bit less strong. Like even out of America, you get things like BoJack Horseman these days. So they could make a film that just is like, yeah, the world ends at the start, and not have to bring it back at the end. Or
well, that is the thing, isn't it? It's a Hulu series, so it's not even, if it's Hulu, that's primarily for an American audience. So I wonder how on earth that's gonna. I'd be interested to hear that turns out.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see the Watch, the Discworld series?
No, I haven't. I mean, any of that kind of thing is very difficult to get hold of here in Japan. Even when I watched this film, I went on Amazon Prime last night, and for whatever reason, they only had the dubbed. So I had to borrow Matt's Blu-ray instead.
Oh my God.
I was going to say that it's a little surprising how hard this one was to come by, because we usually don't have that problem unless it's a real obscuro one. So
maybe this is a bit more obscuro than we realize.
It has become a bit obscure. That's the thing. I think it's it's sort of fallen into a little bit of a cult hole, I think.
Well,
which is nice.
For a long time, like Douglas Adams was constantly working on something new. Whereas now we base, apart from that Owen Colfer novel, we haven't had any Hitchhikers for 16 years. So it makes sense that it's not as fresh and readily available, and it is just for tedious old nerds like us.
Well, what's I contributed to a Kickstarter earlier in the year for a book called 42, and that was, so when he died, he donated all of his notebooks to his to Cambridge, and again, this a lot of my information comes from this Doctor Who book, but there's a bit at the back where the author talks about getting to look at the note, because he would get access to the notes in the university to look at the script and all that. But he says in there was things like, there was a script for episode 1 of series 2 of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on telly, which obviously just never happened. And there's lots of just notes and bits and bobs. So this book that hopefully will come out at some point, but there was a Kickstarter earlier in the year that compiles all of his sort of weird little notes and ideas. But it would not surprise me if someone tried to also create more Hitchhiker's content with his bullet points and ideas or treatments or whatever.
I think since this film came out, there's been 2 different adaptations of Dirk Gently, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there is some appetite for this stuff. So hopefully we will see more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also,
I mean,
I don't really need a new TV series because I'm now remembering that I haven't read or listened to the old stuff in ages. So I could just go back and read that or listen to that and get the experience I want.
Yeah, what you need really is there for this in pretty pristine form. Again, the book or the radio drama. I mean, that really is the thing for this, you know.
So yeah, maybe the question isn't what do I want to see, because I've got what I need. It's what can they do for like get a new generation into it.
Like we're saying, even this film's more of like a gateway. Like if you're already into it, you didn't particularly need this film. Just to get us Yankees watching it, I guess.
It's also nice that it got made. I feel a wee bit of sadness when I watch it, because there's always a feeling of like he spent so much of his life trying to get that film made, and then it happened 4 years after he died.
Yeah, it is a shame.
But yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head how much money was thrown at this film? Because it looks great.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna say 35 million. I'm gonna say it's a 35 million job, but I'm gonna Google it now.
50 million, so a little more.
Oh, okay. Shows you how much I know about budgets.
Yeah. Well, now budgets are what? It's like,
well, yeah, the 50 million film doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's $10
You've got
or it's
D&D or 150. Yeah.
God, that stresses me out. I get stressed out with it because I do video work, and I get stressed out when I work with a budget of a few grand. Can you imagine that pressure? Jesus. Anyway.
We have armies of caterers when you have that kind of budget too. So
yeah, well, here's hoping for the new one anyway. I to be honest, I don't care if they change loads as long as it's good.
I almost would prefer if they did, because then at least I'm getting new content.
Yeah. Well, the sort of thing I was going to say about the Discworld thing is that so the Discworld series that came out earlier in the year was it took a lot of creative license. Like, it was really different, very, very different. And in the end, I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped, but that wasn't anything to do with the design choices, because in the first few episodes I was so on board. And the thing I really enjoyed about it is that because Discworld itself was such a massively rich and huge universe of stories, what it could then do is it told a slightly kind of different story, and but what would happen is all these peripheral characters would pop up. Almost, you would see characters from different books popping up, and it was a mostly original story, kind of made from bits of different stories. And as a fan of the books, it was great, because what you could do is you could watch it, enjoy a new story, but also at the same time go, oh yeah, that's that. I know him. Oh, it's him. And instead of waiting for lines to come, because that's the thing I always find watching adaptations is like, I know the line that's coming up. There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like the first time you're watching it is like watching a film for the 10th time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if the Hitchhiker, setup story, because you have to start with this thing with the Earth getting destroyed, ending up on the Vogon ship. It might make, maybe there's some like telling Spider-Man's origin story again sort of problem here.
For us, at least, there is. The problem is that they do have to do that for any new adaptation, because it's not as big as Spider-Man.
Exactly, even more so, right? But it's like with Hitchhikers, you have to get through this opening, and it's a great setup.
That's what I mean. We're now at the point where with Spider-Man, everyone on Earth knows Spider-Man's origin. They never have to show us that again. Whereas Hitchhikers is not in that place. So unfortunately, they are going to have to keep showing us that until one clicks.
I do look forward to the trailer for the next one coming out, and it's been he wakes up in his apartment in New York. It's being demolished. And Twitter just goes absolutely mental.
I thought I did that already.
He gets onto the Heart of Gold and says, "Oh man, I need a coffee."
Well, that just happened. Yeah.
It's what there's some recent movie where it's like every line was that, I think.
That's his thing.
That
just happened.
Yeah, I think it was some other.
Even in this,
Mom's
Dad did drop a. That was awkward.
Yeah, it was 2005 though. You get away with a little more. Hey, that could be the start of it all. We don't know. I guess we'll wind up our riff-raff today. Riff-raff chit-chat. I don't even know. Yeah.
We've gone on lots of tangents. It's been great.
Right. Richie, what are you up to on the interwebs? You got a link or two for us or our listeners?
Oh my God. What am I doing? Oh, well, actually, it will be good to talk about because you guys are a sci-fi podcast. I'm currently trying to find people to speak to about a project that I'm putting together about Doctor Who fandom during the wilderness years. So that's the 90s. So I'm looking for people who perhaps went to events or held their own events or exhibitions, or any people that went to pub groups, did loads of tape trading, all that sort of stuff that happened in that weird, wonderful period when the show was off the telly. I'm basically trying to make a documentary about fandom and the mental things that they got up to during that period. So if you want to go to Doctor Who fan doc, Doctor Who fan doc.com, there's a wee video about what we're doing and a contact form. So go. Yeah, if that sounds like you, then please get in touch. I'll keep an eye on my inbox.
Okay, yeah, I'll make sure to include that link.
Thank you.
Radio.
Right, I guess I'm doing my bit.
You're doing your bit.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can find the podcast on Twitter at MLSFS114. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating and review. Tell all your friends. If you like the music you've heard in this podcast, you can find more of Matt's music by going to rovingstagemedia.bandcamp.com. And if you want to help us keep these podcasts online and maybe listen to other podcasts me and Matt create, go to patreon.com/podcastio.
Wow, you're so much more lucid than I am at this early time of the morning.
I could do that spiel in my sleep at this point, and I hate myself for it.
At this point in my life, time differences shouldn't be surprising, but it is blowing my mind that you're getting up and I'm going to bed.
Yep.
Well, we were crawling out bleary-eyed. We always do 6 a.m.s, and I'm like, man, what did I just do when we finish? And then I listen. I'm like, oh, okay, this is listenable. That's good. It's just I was not functioning.
Richie actually mentioned Peep Show just now, so he's finally a guest who will understand. The reason I called our Patreon Podcastio Podcastius, it's named after Consultio Consultius.
Oh, that's good.
But everyone thinks it's a Harry Potter thing.
Oh, no.
It makes sense. I mean, if you shout that at someone loudly, they're going to think that you're, cursing them to some kind of podcast hell.
Yep.
Podcastius. And then your head explodes in a Twitter burst.
I know
Twitter.
that pain I'm not living there now, but most of my life, spending years of my life living in what is now apparently the Harry Potter city, Edinburgh. Absolutely dominated by Harry Potter tourism now. It's so mental. But anyway.
No, we just have all the samurai stuff around here.
Luckily, I'm super into all that, so it doesn't bother me.
Oh yeah, honestly, it bothers me. And then I think I've gone on about the train geeks before, which is really bizarre.
Hey, the train geeks are adorable.
Does the UK have a train geek thing going on?
Well, I mean, you don't see them very often, but I mean, I don't even know if it's still a thing, but they certainly were. You mean we had train spotters and all that sort of stuff. That's a thing.
anytime you ride a train here, you'll see some dude who's just come down to the platform to take photos of the trains.
I see. No, that is. I think that definitely is a thing.
My top moment was waiting for a train at a station. There's one guy that doesn't seem quite right on one platform, another guy that doesn't seem quite right on my platform, and they're both making competing train announcements. Like they're rivals or something, and neither of them are they're not employees of the train company or anything. They're just there because they like to do that.
That's great. Funnily, that a friend of mine told me a story once. He was at the train museum in York, which had loads of just sort of old steam engines on display, and there was a man sincerely, angrily ranting that all of these trains should be there. These beautiful machines should be out on the rails and not stuck in some museum.
Well,
He must be into Thomas.
I think the big difference in the UK, you definitely get people who are into like classic steam trains and stuff. Whereas in Japan, there's people who are into those, but they're also really interested in just like boring modern local trains.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, they've got the bullet train, so they're into those, but they are actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's I think we've gone on one tangent too far at this point, so let's wrap this up.
It's just dangerously close to becoming a train podcast.
So I think, Richie, thanks for joining us, but you and the listeners at home all just need to remember, don't panic.